Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and those who are currently cheering about Mueller's failure to acquire evidence of Russian collusion. You might think you're in the clear now. You might believe that the left has been defanged. You might believe that it is you who is in possession of the one great truth of life. Allow me to disabuse you of that preposterous notion and properly relieve you of the arrogant sense of superiority that you currently carry upon your shoulders. How will I do this? Well, I'm afraid you'll just have to see for yourselves. Be back in a tick. Renfield? Launch the intro. There is nothing wrong with your browser. Do not attempt to refresh the page. We are now controlling all that you see and hear. We control the horizontal and the vertical. We can delude you with 1,000 videos, or expand one single frame to crystal clarity and beyond. We can shape your vision to anything our imagination can design. We shall control all that you perceive until we see fit to release you. You are about to experience the depths of depravity that reach from the folly of human pursuits to the deputy of common sense. Please stand by. The right are currently celebrating what they see as the final coffin nail in the 2020 presidential election. The right believe that the left have been sent to their caves to cower in fear. But a wounded animal is a dangerous animal, and the left always recovers. They will soon return, and in greater numbers. Pride cometh before the fall. That is a lesson that Hillary Clinton has learned well. Do not delude yourselves into believing victory is certain. Do not delude yourselves into believing that your ideology has been vindicated. It isn't, and it hasn't. The biggest obstacle you face right now is chaos theory, but it is far from the only one. Let me explain chaos theory for those who failed to watch my previous video. Physics has had great success at describing certain kinds of behavior. Planets in orbit, spacecraft going to the moon, pendulums and springs and rolling balls, that sort of thing. The regular movement of objects. These are described by what are called linear equations. And mathematicians can solve these equations quite easily. We've been doing it for hundreds of years. But there is another kind of behavior, which physics handles quite badly. For example, anything having to do with turbulence. Water coming out of a spout, air moving over an airplane wing, weather, blood flowing through the heart. Turbulent events are described by nonlinear equations. These are hard to solve. In fact, they're usually impossible to solve. So physics has never understood this whole class of events. At least not until the 60s. The theory that describes this type of behavior is called chaos theory. Chaos theory originally grew out of attempts to make computer models of the weather in the 1960s. Weather is a big, complicated system, namely the Earth's atmosphere as it interacts with the land and the sun. The behavior of this big, complicated system has always defied understanding. So naturally, we cannot predict the weather. But what the early researchers learned from computer models was that even if you could understand it, you still couldn't predict it. Weather prediction is absolutely impossible. The reason for this is that the behavior of the system is sensitively dependent on initial conditions. Let me explain. If I were to use a cannon to fire a shell at a certain weight, at a certain speed, and a certain angle of inclination, and if I then fire a second shell with the same weight, speed, and angle, what will happen? The two shells will land at almost the same spot. That is linear dynamics. But if I have a weather system that I start up with a certain temperature, a certain wind speed, and a certain humidity, and if I then repeat it with almost the same temperature, wind, and humidity, the second system will not behave in the same way. It'll wander off, and rapidly will become very different from the first. Thunderstorms instead of sunshine, freezing rain instead of snow. That is nonlinear dynamics. They are sensitive to initial conditions. Tiny differences become amplified. The shorthand is the butterfly effect. A butterfly flaps its wings in Beijing, and weather in New York is different. Chaos is not just random and unpredictable. We actually find hidden regularities within the complex variety of a system's behavior. That is why chaos has now become a very broad theory that is used to study everything from the stock market to rioting crowds to brainwaves during epilepsy. In any sort of complex system where there is confusion and unpredictability, we can find an underlying order. An underlying order that is essentially characterized by the movement of the system within phase space. Chaos theory says two things. First, that complex systems like weather have an underlying order. Second, the reverse of that. It says that simple systems can produce complex behavior. For example, pool balls. You hit a pool ball and it starts to careen off the sides of the table. In theory, that's a fairly simple system. Almost a Newtonian system. Since you can know the force imparted to the ball and the mass of the ball, you can calculate the angles at which it will strike the walls. And you can predict the future behavior of the ball. In theory, you could predict the behavior of the ball far into the future, as it keeps bouncing from side to side. You could predict where it'll end up 3 hours from now. In theory. But in fact, it turns out you can't predict more than a few seconds into the future. Because almost immediately, very small effects, imperfections in the surface of the ball, tiny indentations in the wood of the table start to make a difference. And it doesn't take long before these differences overpower your careful calculations. So it turns out that this system of a pool ball on a table has unpredictable behavior. That is a brief overview of chaos theory. So, why is this aspect of mathematics such a threat to your ideology? Well, that's a simple answer. Because your ideology is based around the control of other humans. And it usually seeks to control biological processes or desires. And that is impossible. You wish to close the border, do you not? You believe that by closing the border, you'll stop illegal immigration, do you not? Well, you won't, because you can't. Allow me to explain exactly how and why your wall will fail using two simple questions and a brief voyage into history. How would you build an effective impediment across 2,000 miles of territory? And how would you do so without tripling the national debt? You can't. You can't do either of those. A wall is completely ineffective from a financial and practical standpoint. Building a wall that cannot be scaled or tunneled under would bankrupt the U.S. Maintaining it would transform us into a third world country. And even after you destroyed the economy and ruined the lives of average American citizens everywhere, you would still be no closer to keeping Mexicans out than you are now. Do you know why? Because a wall is an ineffective measure by any stretch of the imagination. Walls are not impenetrable. In fact, they're exactly the opposite. Let me spin you a yarn. This is the tale of the greatest wall in the history of mankind. This story is about the Great Wall of China. Considering the size and effort put into its construction over 2,000 years ago, the failure of the Great Wall of China is rather spectacular. It worked as a manifestation of power that put fear into the hearts of barbarian raiders, but didn't keep any invaders from the north out. Rumored to have been built using the dead, the construction took hundreds of years, and some people still mistakenly believe that it is visible from the moon. However, as a defensive measure against invading forces, it has been about as useful to China as a Bible on the battlefield. It can give you comfort, but it won't stop the enemy. The daunting appearance of the Great Wall should have been enough to make possible invaders think twice about their actions. Aside from this, there were also archers positioned all along the wall, making it even more of a threat. Unfortunately, invaders often decided to simply ride around the wall. There were also large garrisons manning the wall's larger gates, with the purpose of keeping invaders from breaking in. But again, unfortunately, during the most crucial stages of Chinese history, traders willingly opened the gates for the enemy. Did the Great Wall succeed at anything? Yes, the Great Wall served very well in the times of the first emperor, as all invaders were effectively kept out of the country. However, one might argue that it was more due to the great armies of Qin Shi Huang and their achievements on the battlefield, rather than the effectiveness of the wall. Rulers of the Han Dynasty hoped that the wall would offer them the same protection that it had for the first emperor. But this was not to be. The Zhang Yu up in the north grew even stronger. And in 200 BCE, they overran China, looting and plundering. The weakened Han Dynasty could not provide enough men to guard the wall, and so naturally, the Zhang Yu simply took control of the main gates and entered the land without much trouble. The wall failed. But this wasn't the last time the wall failed. The Xiongnu invaded Shanxi and besieged Taiwan. No, not that Taiwan, different Taiwan. Taiwan, not Taiwan. Anyway, after several skirmishes, the Han Emperor had to marry off his daughter to the Xiongnu ruler in order to make peace. And the Chinese had no choice but to accept the Xiongnu state as an equal, and based on an agreement, the Great Wall started to act as a border between the two states. After a few hundred years, the Xiongnu faded into history, and the Great Wall was effective enough to keep random barbarian looters away. But when a real danger arose, the Great Wall was again nothing more than a scarecrow. Such a situation developed during the late stages of the Song dynasty. The dynasty was politically divided and in a feeble state. The same could have been said about the Great Wall. At first, the land was overrun by the Jurchens, who conquered the capital of Song Kai-feng and imprisoned the whole imperial family and its court. This led to the establishment of the Southern Song dynasty, which was founded by the remains of the imperial court. At the same time, the Jin dynasty on the northern border had to fend off attacks from Mongols led by Genghis Khan. By this time, the Great Wall, built by hundreds of thousands of workers, had collapsed in many places. At some point, the Mongols were able to find a part in the wall that they could simply ride over. That's all it took. And you know how this song and dance goes. The Mongols overthrew the Jin dynasty, took control of northern China, and soon wiped out all other Chinese dynasties as well. By the year 1271, the Mongol Kublai Khan had declared the creation of the Yuan dynasty, which ruled with a heavy hand over the Chinese until 1368. The Great Wall was actually briefly revived during the Chinese Ming dynasty, which drove out the Mongols and started a thorough rebuilding of the wall so that they could never re-enter Chinese territory. The Great Wall, as we know it today, is mostly the creation of the Ming Dynasty era. And although it was a massive undertaking, it ended up being pointless. The Mongols never came back, but in truth, they hardly even tried. By 1644, the Ming Dynasty was about to collapse. And at the gates of the Great Wall was a powerful new enemy, the Manchus. We will never know if this would have been the great moment for the wall to write itself into history, as the battle for China never took place. General Wu Sanghui, who was in charge of protecting the country, decided to switch sides and opened the gate of the Great Wall to the invaders in the Shanhai Pass. So, what did we learn here, kiddies? The Mongols possessed none of our technology, and yet they were not deterred by the Great Wall. Neither were the Jurchens before them, nor the Xiongnu before them, and they had even less technology than the Mongols. The armies that besieged ancient China were not daunted by this barrier. It might have been constructed out of Legos for all the good it did. The only time the Great Wall was proven effective was when there was an equally great ruler to match it, along with his armies. So, how is it that you think Trump can succeed with a pale imitation of what didn't work before? I've said it before, I'll say it again. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. You are trying to fix a legitimate problem, but you are trying to fix a square peg in a round hole. You're looking at the wrong problem. You are trying to bend animal behavior to your will, and you actually believe you can succeed. You can't. You don't understand the mathematical problems with your proposal. If you build a wall, people will scale it. If they can't scale it, they'll go under it. If they can't go under it, they'll go around it. And in the case of the southern border, they'll do what they always do. They will do what they are currently doing as I speak. They'll fly over the border in commercial jets with temporary work visas, which will then expire, and after that, these people will disappear into the woodwork, getting jobs working as cheap labor for giant corporations, which people like you refuse to regulate. You know what the secret is to solving the illegal immigration crisis? It is very simple, but it's not one that you'll enjoy hearing. And I know that the politicians will not go for it. The secret is to remove the incentive that appeals to illegal immigrants. Literally, all you have to do is stop businesses from giving them jobs. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. That's the secret. Removing the monetary carrot that dangles in front of illegal immigrants removes any reason for them to cross the border in the first place. And all you have to do to achieve this is prevent businesses from hiring them. And you know what else? When you do that, Americans that are currently jobless will be presented with new opportunities for work. They'll get jobs, they'll get paid, they'll pay taxes, they'll feed their families, who will receive better educations, allowing for new scientists, new doctors, new engineers, new lawyers, new policemen, new firefighters, new businessmen, and new tradesmen. Those people will invent new medicines and new technologies. They'll defend the justice system. They'll fight crime. They'll heal the sick. And all of them will pay taxes, which will give more money to the government, which will allow the government to pay for infrastructure, education, law enforcement, national security, salaries for federal employees, and other such expenses. After that, the economy will improve, the US will become the ultimate, undisputed world superpower, and everyone wins. Don't you get it? Building a wall doesn't solve anything. That's the worst economic decision. That is not how you solve illegal immigration, nor is it how you make America great again. Here's a thought. Instead of trying to force illegal immigrants to stay in their own countries, you can remove the reason they want to cross the border in the first place. Anyone with a brain could figure that out. Which is why Trump didn't. If he were actually intelligent, he would have figured that out 3 years ago. Just like every other problem in the US, the problem you face is caused by unregulated capitalism. Go ahead, call me a commie. It won't remove the logic inherent within my statement. If logic scares you, try religion. No logic is required for that. Okay, let's talk domestic issues. First, abortion. Once again, you are trying to fix the wrong problem. You cannot prevent abortions, and you cannot prevent people from having sex before marriage. There are over 1 billion people in this country. Do you know what you'll achieve if you pass laws against abortion and premarital sex? Nothing. You won't get anything. Not even a lump of coal in your stockings. The only results of your foolish attempts to control human behavior will be that behavior will be driven underground. You tried this already. You tried it in the 20s. Prohibition failed miserably. You tried to stop people from drinking. Guess what? People love alcohol. So they created speakeasies and moonshine. You tried this with the war on drugs. You're still trying it. Guess what? People still do drugs. People still do crack, meth, heroin, PCP, shrooms, LSD, DMT, and every single other illegal drug on the face of the planet. And you know what else happened because you tried to control human nature? There were unexpected consequences. There always are with chaos theory. You cannot control human behavior, and when you try, bad things happen. In the 20s, the mob managed to dominate society because they provided the one thing that everybody wanted. They provided alcohol. They provided illegal alcohol and places to drink it. And because of that, they ruled with an iron fist. And you know what? The same thing is going on with the war on drugs. Gangs supply the drugs, and they rule with an iron fist. History repeats itself. The endless waltz marches on. But think about this. I have a different perspective for you. If you legalized drugs and taxed them as you do with alcohol and cigarettes, you would gain a ludicrous amount of tax money, and less people would be harmed because you'd be cutting the gangs out of the picture. By making sure that the government is responsible for regulating drugs, you will be making sure that those drugs are prepared safely. No more stories of people putting rat poison in other people's drugs. I mean, drugs are bad enough for you already. You don't need rat poison in them. In any case, it gets better. Without the gangs, you don't have to worry about gang members committing crimes. This is already proven to be effective. States like Colorado have seen their tax revenue go up and their crime go down. This is a fact. Once again, if logic scares you, try religion. And yet, somehow, despite this fact, you still think that you can do the same thing with abortion. But you know what? The same thing that is happening with drugs will happen with abortion and premarital sex. And do you know why? Because it already is. It's already happening. And it has been for the entirety of human history. Do either of you remember those stories about coat hangers from the 60s? Or the 70s, or the 80s, or whatever year it was when you were growing up? Well, what about the stories where women took excessive amounts of over-the-counter drugs in order to terminate an unwanted pregnancy? Well, those stories actually happened. And so did thousands more like them. And I'm sure that some of you conservatives are shouting, "We gotta teach them more abstinence!" Well, I've got news for you. Abstinence doesn't work. A 2007 federal report concluded that abstinence-only programs have no influence on the rates of abstinence. Furthermore, another study found that students who received proper sex education were 60% less likely to become pregnant than those who received abstinence-only education. And ironically, but not surprisingly, the states that have the highest teen pregnancy rates are those that practice, say it with me, abstinence-only education. Do you know why all of this happens? It's very simple. Even an imbecile could understand it. This happens because you are trying to control animal behavior. Humans are animals. Animals have a desire to breed, and there are no words you can say, commands you can give, or laws you can pass that will ever change this. Teenagers want to fuck. People want to fuck. You can't stop them, and preaching to people about how their desires are a sin against a God that they fail to believe in is a failure waiting to happen. Nobody cares what God thinks of them, especially when it comes time to seal the deal. Even those on your own side are having sex before marriage. Becoming a Christian does not erase your innate biological needs. It just, say it with me, drives them underground. And they then come out in unhealthy ways. Nobody is thinking of hell when Elsa Jean is lying splayed out on their bed. Not one person. Ever. Do you know why? Again, the concept is so simple that an idiot could understand it. Hell is a very poor deterrent against human behavior, because hell is intangible. You can't force me to experience hell, and therefore you can't prove to me that it exists. Let me put it this way. Suppose I told you that at some point tomorrow night, a giant Lovecraftian monster would drag you kicking and screaming into a realm of utter lunacy. And suppose I told you that you could be saved from this fate by swearing an oath of fealty to this monster, and of course, to me, the earthly servant. Suppose that the terms of this oath are total obedience to the whims of the beast as given to you by the earthly servant. And suppose I told you that if you violated the oath, the Lovecraftian monster would return, and it would fulfill the promise it made. If I told you that, you'd laugh at me, wouldn't you? Of course you would, because my claim is asinine. Now imagine this. I could very well die in my sleep tomorrow. So could you. You tell me that if I fail to obey God, and by extension, the earthly teachings which He left for me, then I will go to hell. Now do you understand why I laugh at you? Your claims of God and hell are just as ridiculous as my hypothetical claims of being a servant to a Lovecraftian monster. And for all intents and purposes, your God is a Lovecraftian monster. But it doesn't matter, because you have no physical evidence for the existence of your God. And that is because there is no evidence for your God, or any God for that matter. Without evidence, there can be no proof, and without proof, Why would you expect me to believe that your God had the power to send me anywhere? In fact, why would you expect me to believe that he has any power at all? If you cannot prove to me that hell is a serious threat, you cannot effectively prove it to anyone else. And because you have no evidence, you cannot use hell as an effective method to suppress human behavior. I absolutely 100% guarantee you that every unmarried person in your church is hooking up with somebody. And I'd bet serious money that the person is probably sitting in the same church. Furthermore, when your daughter is pregnant and it's her future on the line, all your arguments against abortion will disappear. They'll evaporate. You care more about your precious little girl than you do about your God. Because in the end, you can hold your daughter in your arms. You can speak to her. You can see her smile. She has spent every waking moment of her life with you. And none of that can be said about your God. You cannot prevent others from having abortions, and you won't prevent your daughter from having one should the time come. You cannot even remain faithful to your own morality. So why on earth do you expect others to do what you cannot? Give up. You're fighting a losing battle. The next issue is economics. You always complain that women are ignoring their responsibilities as mothers and housewives. You complain about women having children instead of pursuing careers. But do you know why that is? Because most American women don't have the luxury of being housewives. Unless you are born into wealth, all of us, male and female, have to work our asses off, or our children will get no education, and we will all probably starve. We all work miserable, thankless jobs for shit pay, all because Jeff Bezos wants yet another multi-million-dollar mansion. Do you want more housewives? Then force corporations to pay us enough to live on. Back in the 80s, you could buy a house for $50,000. That would buy you a medium-sized house with a 2-car garage. You know what happens now? A house is over $200,000. And we are paid even less than we were in the 80s. You want something to fix? Fix that. And furthermore, you argue that we should be having more children. That is the most asinine thing I've ever heard. The last thing anyone needs is more children. Do you have any idea how bad the overpopulation problem has gotten? I will let you in on something that neither the Republicans nor the Democrats are willing to address. The Earth has a maximum carrying capacity of 9 billion. Do you know how many people we have now? I can hear you typing away at your keyboards, and I'll save you a trip to Google. We have 7.5 billion people, approximately. And we'll exceed our limit before we hit the year 2050. In only 30 years, we will have reached the point of no return. And you know what else? That thing I just said a few seconds ago? That only applies if we give up animal products entirely and subsist only on plant-based foods. Are you willing to do that? I know I'm not. But if we don't, then our maximum global population size is 8 billion, not 9 billion, which we will exceed in less than 10 years. You know what we need more of? Abortions and contraception. You know what we need less of? Children. And this is coming from a man who wants to have children. I want children. Do you know what I plan to do about that? I plan to adopt a couple of children. I plan to adopt a couple of children from the foster care system who need me far more than any potential children I might have biologically. That is what I will do to help. What you will do is exacerbate the problem until extinction is inevitable. All of your ideology comes from a moral standpoint, and all of your morality comes from Bronze Age fairy tales. But you know what? Your God has provided you with very poor guidance for preserving this world and the creatures who live on it, including us. His 10 Commandments have not given you the power to save us from ourselves, nor has he provided you the clairvoyance to see what everyone else can see with their eyes closed. Bronze Age fairy tales are destroying us all, so let me provide you with another perspective. Let me give you a new set of commandments to follow. Here are my 10 commandments. Number 1, question everything, but especially authority. No matter what you believe, no matter what others believe, no matter what the world believes, and no matter what those in positions of power believe, question all things. Seek knowledge above all else. Follow the path of wisdom and take nothing as gospel truth. If it exists, question it. Number 2, keep an open mind, but not one so open that your brain falls out. Think critically and don't let internal or external bias cloud your judgment. Use logic as your lantern and reason as your map. Follow the dimly lit corridors of life and do your best to parse out fact from fiction. Number 3, do not force your beliefs onto others. Debates are healthy. However, be mindful of social boundaries. Remember, it is impossible to force a person to believe something that they don't wish to. And even if it were possible, authoritarian methods never solve anything. They only breed resentment, anger, and hate. Number 4, do no physical harm unless the life of you or someone else is in immediate danger. Avoid violence whenever possible. Never attack. Use violence only to defend others. Always try to resolve conflict peacefully, and use force only as a last resort. Remember, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without ever raising your blade. Direct action is not always the best way. It is far more advantageous to make an enemy see through your eyes than to close theirs forever. Use words first, then if all else fails, be prepared to fight for your life. But never make the first strike. Number 5, keep a sense of humor about everything. When humor goes, it means you've lost your perspective. Humor is the ideological canary in the coal mine. Its cheery melody signals that fanaticism is still far in the future. When that little bird stops singing, it reveals that you've become so involved with an idea that the mere idea of joking about it enrages you. The less humor you have towards a subject, the less objective your opinion is towards that subject. If you can't joke about it, maybe it's time to re-examine the idea and what makes it so serious that mere words threaten to damage it. Number 6. Live for your own dreams, your own goals, and your own wishes. Do not let others dictate how you live. Your destiny is written by you. In the stage performance of your life, you are the star of the show. Others may play supporting roles, and they may influence your decisions to varying degrees, but no matter what happens, never let them gain so much power over you that you become a mere puppet on a string. If you become emotionally enslaved to another person or people, then you will never reach your full potential as a human. You will always be holding back and worrying about what this person might say, or what that person might think, or what those people might be saying behind your back. In the end, you are in this for yourself. Make your dreams come true, not theirs. Number 7. Be mindful of your own ego and your own hubris. A selfish and prideful mind is not an open one. By all means, be independent. Follow your dreams without letting others control you. But never become so egotistical that calluses develop on your heart. Do not create walls around your heart, for what is first constructed is not so easily demolished. The definition of true freedom is never allowing anyone to unduly influence your life, but still retain the required humility to accept defeat gracefully and to accept help from others without shame. A life of solitude is not a life worth living. Live independently, but do not feel ashamed to lean on others when the weight of the world threatens to crush you. Also, do not become so enamored with yourself and your own ideas that you lose the capacity to feel empathy for others and their ideas. Have empathy for others, but do not value their opinions so much that those opinions completely swallow your own. All things must maintain a balance, because balance is necessary to achieve success. Number 8. Do your best to enrich the lives of those less fortunate than you. Charity is one of the greatest virtues there is. Give to those who have less than you. Remember, not everyone has the luxuries that you might. Even if it's just an old pair of pants, a toy without the batteries, a winter coat that's one size too small, an outdated smart device, a few cans of soup, or perhaps just a simple outstretched hand of comfort. And when you give, do not expect something in return. That is the selfishness I spoke of in the previous commandment. The smile upon the face of the one who receives your gift should be thanks enough. You might not know it, but you just became that person's hero. A hero can be anyone, even a kind ex-cop who took a young man to the movies once to let him know that the world hadn't abandoned him. Heroes are just ordinary people who find a way to make other people feel like they matter. Be a hero to another person as often as you can, because you never know when you might need someone to be a hero to you. Number 9, follow your dreams. If you desire something in this world, do your best to make it yours. However, Never cause unnecessary suffering to achieve your dreams. And be realistic. Never strive for something that lies eternally beyond your reach. Many have been driven to despair and madness due to the obsession with a futile endeavor. However, if you know that you can do something, and that something will make you happy beyond your wildest dreams, then seize that something, and never let it go until it's yours. If you seek a romantic partner, and you know he or she is within your grasp, then sweep him or her off their feet and live your lives together with no regrets. Even if fate itself stands against you, defy all those who would stop you to grab hold of your destiny with your own two hands. And never give up. Ever. Number 10. Defend free speech with your life. Not just speech you agree with. All speech must be protected. Even that which is vile and abhorrent. Defend free speech not only as a legal right, but also as a human right. Remember, the dog of censorship is fickle, and it will attack its master if it escapes its leash. Censoring your opponents may give you the smug sense of satisfaction now, but the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry. And should your opponent rise to power, the very same laws and practices that you used against that opponent may be bent to serve the will of the people you sought to silence. You will have no defense and no one to blame but yourselves. Instead of trying to silence dissent, fight your opponents with the very speech that they use against you. Defeat ideas with ideas. The evolutionary process works on an ideological level as well as a biological one. Bad ideas are discarded in favor of better ones. And yet, some of the people who accept the reality of biological evolution fail to understand ideological evolution. And usually it's for the same exact reasons held by those they'd seek to ridicule for believing in a deity. Our morality is a part of us. It's a part of our brains and a part of our evolution. So it may take millions of years for terrible ideas such as fascism, authoritarianism, totalitarianism, and other such concepts to die out. In the meantime, all you can do is make sure that you pass on the best ideas that you can. Make sure that you pass them on to the next generation. That way, the ideas will live on. Remember, you cannot destroy an idea. An idea is not a physical object, and therefore it cannot be smashed, ripped, burned, melted, blown up, or otherwise physically eliminated. The only way to truly destroy an idea is to make that idea so unnecessary that it becomes a biological imperative to avoid breeding with people who hold that idea. Censorship is at best useless, and at worst, a double-edged sword. Free speech is the solution. Unofficial 11th commandment. Live in the moment. Enjoy every minute you have on this earth. Don't waste any of it. You get one life. Make the best of it. Make your life spectacular. I know I have. Well, those are my commandments. Those are my 10 rules for life. I didn't even need 12. Suck it, Jordan Peterson. But wait, those ideas frighten you, don't they? They don't fit into your neat and orderly picture of the world, do they? They leave you in anguished mourning for days long past. During the rise of modern times, when these Bronze Age fairy tales are being thrown out, when you are surrounded by nothing but despair. Surely somewhere in the darkest depths of your hearts, you are beginning to believe that there is no God in this world at all. I myself have never believed in faith or God. If they exist, perhaps Trump is their way of divine justice and providence. Maybe he is the punishment for a species that has strayed so far from their design. Maybe they sent him to tear the whole corrupt temple down and reveal the sinister machinations of those within. After all, God has a sense of irony, right? Regardless, my faith in the human spirit was shattered long ago. Long before Trump. By the time he became president, I'd long since become empty and hollow inside. There remains no faith in mankind left for me to lose. Not that I take Trump seriously enough to let him affect my mental state. What worries me far more than Trump is the ever-widening gap between the right and the left, not just in the US, but in every other major Western country as well. I ask myself, what happens when the divide between two groups grows too big for either group to tolerate each other any longer? And I answer myself, nothing but the deaths of innocent people, the lamentations of mothers and fathers who have lost their children, of husbands and wives who have lost their partners, of sisters and brothers who have lost their siblings, the flashing of explosions, the sound of gunfire, and through it all the cold reality that all of this could have been avoided had we simply talked to each other and come to an understanding. I've studied history. This has happened countless times before. The ideas put forth by extremists endanger everybody. And I won't just shut up and go away. I'll keep drilling this into everybody's heads until it either gets through or I have a myocardial infarction from the rise in my blood pressure that this stress causes. I'll keep talking until it kills me. Because extremism needs to be called out, no matter what side it comes from. You are just as dangerous as those you argue against, and you have no desire to entertain anybody's opinions but your own. That is why your trivial words of blame, of shame, and of guilt mean nothing to me. There are no words typed on paper, nor messages expressed through the lens of a camera that can make me feel even the slightest bit of sympathy for you. The closest thing to a positive emotion that I feel for you is pity. Pity for people so locked in their ideological hell, populated only by the demons of their imaginary persecutions and delusions of a world that in all reality moves on with or without you. I pity you. I pity all of you. I don't hate you. You are not worth the effort it takes to hate. Because all of you, both left and right, have become the monsters you set out to destroy. Regardless of what you think of me, I've actually gone out of my way to remain unbiased. Do you know what the difference between us is? Do you know what sets us apart? The difference is that when you looked into the abyss, you blinked. I've fought my way through every major battle in my life and won. Whether it be mental illness, an abusive childhood, loss of friends, failed relationships, or my own inner demons, I simply knuckled down and said, "Come at me, all of you!" And I emerged from each battle I fought, bloodied, broken, and exhausted, but also stronger. And you know what? I'll keep on fighting. Because no matter what battles we have raging inside us, we always have a choice. My little sister taught me that. She chose to be the best of herself, even though she certainly didn't have to. It's our choices that make us who we are, and we can always choose to do what's right. After all, morality isn't something we're born with, and it isn't something associated with a particular ideology. The morality a person possesses is determined by their choices alone. To paraphrase a very wise man, if you want to know what a person is like, take a good look at how they treat their inferiors, not their equals. And to quote him directly, you fail to realize that it matters not what someone is born, but what they grow up to be. It's really funny that a fictional wizard can sum up every single problem with our ideas than I can with this entire hour-plus long video. We really are such hopeless creatures. Nothing lasts forever, kids. However, anything worth its value is worth fighting for. You, the next generation, you are the ones who will inherit our legacy. Do not make the same mistakes that we did. You have a chance to be better than we ever were. However, should you fail, should you be unsuccessful, you will end up repeating history. A history full of miserable battles. Those who ignore the lessons of the past have no future. And those who lose the capacity to think become creatures whose existence has no value. The hands of mankind are stained with the blood of their brethren. Ambitions and cravings, vengeance and hatred, justice and fate, ignorance and escapism. We never learn, we never listen. How long must the accursed dance continue? The performance must eventually end. The orchestra is falling silent. The endless waltz is finally reaching its climax. When it stops, we will be faced with either salvation or oblivion. The nature of that outcome is in your hands. The choice between extinction and survival rests upon your shoulders. What will you choose, I wonder? Hope or despair? Redemption or destruction? Hate or love? Fate has placed a cruel weight upon your backs. Are you capable of shouldering the burden? Or are you destined to be crushed beneath it? Will you embrace the better angels of your natures? Or will you be consumed by your inner demons? The future is always in motion. But one thing remains certain. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. It will devour you. Beware of egotism. Beware of smiling faces that hide predatory teeth. Beware of your pride. Beware of anger. Beware of ideological blindness. But most of all, beware of authority. Those in power serve no one but themselves. If you forget that crucial truth, you open the door for a tyrant to take hold of everything you hold dear and crush it within his iron grip. A storm is coming. The future is a chaotic maelstrom of which the outcome is still very much uncertain. Only time can reveal the path we will take. I just hope we can bear the cost of our decisions. A little bit of commentary on the making of this project. When I set out to do this, I had absolutely no idea that I'd be making 45 videos. And this is the 46th. If someone had told me that these were the kinds of videos that I'd be making, hour-long forays into philosophy, politics,
and whatever else I want to talk about, I would have laughed at them. I would have said, I'm just here to mock idiots. That's my purpose. That's it. But the fact remains that I'm still here, and I'm still talking. And what I talk about has changed drastically. I never planned on doing standalone videos at all. I only ever intended to make response videos. But fate has a sense of humor and a sense of irony, as the type of videos that I have the most fun making are standalone videos. Response videos are very formulaic. They have too many constraints. So I love videos like this where I can basically just talk as myself. Not really as the deputy of common sense, but as me. There is something quite comforting about speaking your mind for all the world to hear. During the process of your work, it's all that matters. Nothing else even seems to exist outside my desire to hear my voice ring out in the great halls of academia, and to watch as my words are immortalized on paper forevermore. It's intoxicating. Sometimes I begin to lose myself in it, to drown in it. And every time I begin to sink beneath the waves of my own ego, I fight to remain who I am. Fiercely, desperately. And sometimes I fail. Sometimes I'm swallowed whole by my own desire to succeed, to make an impact, to leave my mark on the world. Rank, personal history and birth, race, sex, the name given to me, it's all meaningless to me at this point. I have no attachments to anything. Nothing tethers me to this planet, save one fragile thing. The desire to fight. The desire to fight on behalf of my own version of reality. The desire to fight not just for myself, but for everyone. Everyone on this planet. To make the world a better place. And while I face down my opponents with logic as my sword and truth as my shield, in a meaningless YouTube arena, I have to admit, I've never felt so complete. Maybe I'll end up drowning after all. But as long as I'm here, I will fight with the pure instinct to remain grounded in who I am. Because if I lose that, then all I've done here is for naught. That is precisely the reason I created this channel. It was designed for the sole purpose of giving a voice to the part of me that screams, "No, you idiots, you're doing it wrong!" But I realized some time ago that it has become something else. That I have become something else. The man I was would have mocked the man I have become. And the man I have become is one that his former self could neither imagine nor understand. The man I was is a shadow of the pain I experienced and the alienation that I felt from others. The man that I have become is a man that has grown past those things, and also the pale ghost of the man that I will become in the future. This channel is about developing myself as a person. It's about my own personal growth. But most of all, this channel is about you, especially the precious 22 of you that chose to subscribe. Some of you have your subscriptions turned off so that I can't see you, and I understand that. my content might be a problem for those in the workforce. Nonetheless, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me on this journey. But we're not done yet. We've got so much time and so little to do. Wait, strike that, reverse it, and with that parting joke, we'll close things out. This looks like the end. Why don't I let you depart my castle and go home to your warm, flickering fireplaces and soft, comfy beds. And as you drift off into dreamland, consider that while we cannot control what others do, we can control what we do. I'm the Deputy of Common Sense. I dispense swift justice to those who aren't so swift. Remember, no matter what happens, we always have a choice, and we can always choose to do what's right. What will you choose?
Morning. They're a little young.
That they are.
They look a little nervous.
Right, I need all flight crews to report to their designated areas immediately.
Major. Barland. Sir.
Good morning. Good morning.
In less than an hour, aircraft from here will join others from around the world. And you will be launching the largest aerial battle in the history of mankind. Mankind, that word should have new meaning for all of us today. We can't be consumed by our petty differences anymore. We will be united in our common interest. Perhaps it's fate that today is the 4th of July, and you will once again be fighting for our freedom. Not from tyranny, oppression, or persecution, but from annihilation. We're fighting for our right to live, to exist. And should we win the day, the 4th of July will no longer be known as an American holiday, but as the day when the world declared in one voice, we will not go quietly into the night. We will not vanish without a fight. We're going to live on. We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.